I know this sounds bad, but hear me out first before making a judgment. I, 25-year-old female, a single mom to my son, 8 years old. After busting for years, I was able to buy a house in a low-income area. It's not the best house. I'm having to do quite a bit of work on it, but it's safe in its home. One of the things I have done to make it a tad bit better is gardening. It doesn't take up the entire yard, just a garden bed near my porch and another around a tree. I'm hoping to eventually put in a few more around the house, but it's expensive and time-consuming. And I'm proud of what I've accomplished so far. My neighbor Lisa is a single mom of 6 kids. Her 3 youngest, 8, 7, and 4. And constantly at my house playing with my son. This isn't a problem for me, but I do have to get on them quite often. These kids are wild. I feel like I'm constantly having to talk to Lisa about their behavior. For the past months, I have talked to her almost daily about the kids being in my garden. Watching them doesn't help as they even come over when me nor my son is home to play in my yard. I have tried to fix this by putting up anything my son has outside. Bikes, poles, taking the swings off of a swing set and so on. Nothing stops them. They have taken to play in the garden beds and bringing shovels to dig. I've started getting mad and told Lisa under no circumstances are they allowed in my yard, especially when I'm not home, and they are not allowed in my garden at any time. Finally, this came to a head when I got home 2 days ago. My garden was wrecked. All of my plants were dug up and destroyed. The barrier around the beds were torn apart. My little garden decorations were smashed and drawn on, and there were so many holes and toys. I was pissed. I went over to Lisa's and admittedly yelled at her about her kids. She yelled back that they were kids and I couldn't expect to have a garden with kids around. I demanded payment for the damage and she told me to get off her property. I went home and called the police to report the damage. The cops didn't do much but did tell Lisa that her family was not to come on my property again. I was ranting to my friends about this, and while they do agree that it was wrong, they think I took it too far by calling the cops on such young kids. They think I might have ruined my son's chances at a friend. My son is happy about it though, because he was starting to realize the 2 older of the 3 were using him for his cool stuff. Am I in the wrong? You're not in the wrong. You weren't calling the police on the children. You were calling the police on the parents who are liable for the children. You could try taking them to small claims court. Not in the wrong. You asked them nicely to not trespass and not touch your garden. They then destroyed it. Ages 8 and 7 are certainly old enough to understand that no means no, and a 4-year-old has no business being on your property unsupervised. So no, you are not the jerk for calling the cops. I will put up a small video camera pointing at the garden for now, so you are aware if they are trespassing. Take pictures now for evidence of the original damage, and then if it happens again, take pictures and call the cops again. Not in the wrong. Lisa is an irresponsible parent and her attitude towards other people's property and the actions of her children is inexcusable. You went to her multiple times and she blew it off. You had every right to call the police. If I were you, I'd get a couple of security cameras for next time. You'll have proof and can take it further. I, 31-year-old male, have a breaking and entering charge from trying to enter my ex-girlfriend's place to take back some of the stuff she took when we were breaking up, like my bedding and CDs. She called the cops and I got unfairly charged and prosecuted. Because of this, I couldn't find a place to live and I also have old DUIs, 3 years sober. But my insurance for any vehicle is also insanely high to the point it is cheaper to use Ubers to get around. I needed a place near my work and it's been almost impossible to find one. Finally, I found a woman who was renting out a basement suite, but she wanted a non-smoker and asked me 3 times. I said I didn't smoke because I was desperate for a place and I wouldn't smoke inside, but she came without giving me proper notice. She gave me 15-hour, not 24-hour notice, and saw the cigarette butts on the steps to the place. I was smoking outside, and she freaked out and demanded I leave. I wanted to sign for a year, but she refused to only sign for 3 months because my credit was bad. She forced me to let her into my apartment to check for damage, even though to reassure her I didn't do any smoking inside. I did use my brother as a reference because I didn't have great luck with having good relationships with previous landlords, and she found out later he was my brother and threatened legal action for using a fake reference, but he wasn't fake. I did pay rent to him a few years ago. She began checking up on the place every 2 weeks, claiming she was checking for damage even though I said I would leave after my lease. Then I started seeing this girl I was interested in. We began dating after a few months. The landlord showed up to my place again to inspect the place, and she and my girlfriend started talking, and she told her I had a breaking and entering and DUI charge. No idea how she found out, and my girlfriend has stopped talking to me because of it. I'm sure it's illegal for her to disclose my personal information like that, and I've changed the locks to my place and refused to let her in. She has sent me a letter starting the eviction process, and I'm sure it will take them months to evict me. It will make it even harder for me to find a place to live in the future. But what do you think about this? Was I in the wrong? You are in the wrong. Quote, I said I didn't smoke. You smoke. Quote number 2. I didn't use my brother as a reference because I didn't have great luck with having good relationship with previous landlords. You withheld pertinent information about your renting history. Quote number 3. I'm sure it's illegal for her to disclose my personal information like that. That's a public record, genius. Quote number 4. I've changed the locks to my place and refused to let her in. Well, that's just illegal. Quote number 5. She has sent me a letter starting the eviction process. Good. You're about 10 years too old to be this crabby of a tenant. You are in the wrong. You rent, not own, it's that simple. The landlord has a right to access with proper notice. In an emergency like a water leak, the landlord needs access. If the landlord has to break in, the renter will pay. You are in the wrong. She owns the property. She can hire a locksmith. Reddit. I'm a high school teacher in the US who has ADHD myself. I wasn't diagnosed until college. I want to preface this by saying I'm not perfect. For example, I have lost students' papers before. The issue at hand happened in my 10th grade class where the kids are 15 to 16 years old. I've always taken up points for essays, projects, and homework assignments turned in late. I explained this on day 1 and put it in the syllabus. They lose 10% for each day it's late, but I never take off more than 50% as a late penalty. Usually kids won't turn in major projects more than 1 or 2 days late. This year I had a student with ADHD turn in an essay 6 weeks late. They did an excellent job, but I only gave them a 50% because of how late it was. The second essay counted for 30% of their grade for the quarter. However, the student's second essay lost 40% right off the bat for being 4 class days late. About 2 weeks have passed due to the fact that my class doesn't meet every day, weekend, school holiday. This essay didn't do a good job like the first one, but it was a different style of writing. For the first essay, their excuse was that it was done but they felt like they didn't do it properly and wanted to do it right. It went above and beyond and was far longer than it needed to be. I explained I prefer they turn something in on time rather than exceed expectations but turn it in 6 weeks late. The only explanation for the second essay was that they had it saved on a specific computer at home that they didn't have access to. Their previous English teacher never really had much of a penalty for late work. This student is typically an A student, but they finished the first quarter of my class with a 67 or 68, and I bumped them up to 69.5. Because I pitied them and it would raise them to a C-. The student was argumentative about their grade, and angry with me saying that it wasn't fair. In my defense, they could still earn an A for the course, but they would essentially have to maintain around a 95% average for the rest of the course, including the midterm and final exams. College is so expensive in the US, and I don't want to affect students' averages over an assignment being a few days late. But I also feel like I'm not truly preparing students for college/university/the workforce by letting them turn in work when it's convenient with them without consequences. So, am I in the wrong for sticking to my policy and not boosting her grades? Edit. People keep asking about IEPs and accommodation plans. I work at a private school that offers very limited accommodations, and we have no special ED department. We do not offer extended time on long assignments. We will only chunk them into smaller, more manageable pieces. We only offer extended time for quizzes/tests. Despite parents being aware of ADHD, I realize this student has no file. So I will definitely be talking to the guidance counselor, even though my school doesn't offer extended time. Having an IEP on file for when the student goes to college will serve them very well. I also give class time. They usually get around 2 to 3 hours of class time to write, ask me questions, and do peer revisions. Some of them waste their time by talking or going on their phones. I tell them that I'm not going to get into arguments if they want to waste their time, but that I'm always there to provide any help and support while they work. Usually I have a constant line of kids asking for help, so I can dedicate time to focus and observe this one specific student's work habits, because then I'd have to tell the 3 other kids all asking for help on their essays to hold on. And by that time, the line of students asking for my help will have possibly increased to 5. Edit 2. I did contact the parents after the first missing essay, and the admin knows they got a C- due to late work. I tell students to talk to me before the due time to make arrangements on late work. I am pretty lenient if we come up with a plan ahead of time. I tell them not to tell me the day it's due unless it's something serious like a death, hospitalization, car accident, and so on. For example, a student recently failed a quiz. I followed up and the student broke down saying it was due to family problems at home. I let them complete corrections to raise their F to a C on the quiz. And yes, I've spoken to the student. I reminded them in person and email, but they would ignore me or say I will do it. After the second essay was 2 to 3 days late, I finally forced them to discuss this in more detail, where I explained the policy, why I have it, and how it affects their grades. They seemed pretty receptive until I pulled them aside the following week to discuss why they only earned a C- for the first quarter. They thought it would all balance out because they got A's on the quizzes, and were quite upset with me when that didn't happen. Parents were already informed after the first missing essay, but we have a parent-teacher conference scheduled. What do you guys think about this? You're not in the wrong. We aren't talking about a class period or 2. We're talking about 6 weeks the first time and 4 weeks the second. ADHD is fairly common. Lots of kids with ADHD manage to get their assignments in on time, or only a little late. There is accommodation, and then there is no accountability. What's the point of a deadline if you don't actually adhere to it? I don't think anybody is in the wrong here, but I just want to hijack the previous comment to say that the lateness of this student sounds insane to a neurotypical person. But as someone who has ADHD, I can totally empathize with the thought process and outcome of these projects being so late. Most people have a fundamental misunderstanding of what ADHD is, and the common accommodation of simply giving extra time for tests and whatnot have led people to believe that it simply takes us a bit longer to get things done. The truth is that for many with ADHD, it can be excruciating to get started on a project even when we want to do it. And the sense of needing absolute perfection far outweighs any sort of social pressure associated with a deadline. Not in the wrong. Is there any accommodation given to the student by the school? Sometimes there is policies, or exceptions for students who may need extended periods of time for work.